one real thing that all of us petrol heads talk about is this whole rear-wheel drive type thing, and we love rear-wheel drive, we love rear-wheel drive, we love rear-wheel drive, yeah, oh, front-wheel drive's rubbish, oh, no, all-wheel drive's for girls and stuff. And if we're completely honest with ourselves, there's only really one reason most of us like rear-wheel drive. That's because you all have this dream of having this massive, great big field to yourself. You can just be a bit of an idiot. Oh no, a big field and a slightly permissive owner. You see, if I had to sell that thing and I needed to buy something which was going to be a lot more practical but also fast and hopefully very fun, this would be definitely top of my list. For those of you who are unaware or who couldn't be bothered to read the title of the video, this is an Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Now, you can look at this car from a couple of different angles. Now, you could look at it from a technical perspective. And really, this car is a bit of a marvel. I think when this came out, it really shocked everybody. I mean, Alfa for a long time produced a series of cars which generally got sort of reviews. And the 4C in particular, I think everyone had really high hopes for, and then it just disappointed all who drove it. Now, I haven't yet driven a 4C to see whether I agree with that statement, but I think it's fairly safe to say that when this came out, nobody really expected it to deliver on its promise or be anything close to an M3 rival. And then when it did come out, people really liked it. Not only did they like it, but I'd say for pretty much the first time in a long time, they didn't actually have to make any excuses for it. No longer would they have a sentence that went, well, this is very, very good for an Alfa Romeo. It was just good. But I've not really been up close to one, let alone had the chance to drive one until now. Now, before we do, I'm going to give you just a quick little walk around of the car because I keep getting asked for walk around, so I'm going to give you one. Now, this car is in a shade called Competizione Red. Now, the sun's gone away just now. Hopefully it'll come out again in a moment. But it is absolutely stunning. While the sun's away, it looks like an almost burgundy type colour. It looks quite flat, still very nice, and it's a hell of a nice shape of car. I mean, just look at it. It's actually quite interesting. At the back, I think it looks quite short, quite squat. It's got a real presence to it. In pictures, it looks quite big. In the flesh, it actually looks quite small, quite compact. Now, it's got beautiful alloys on it, which are exactly the sort of thing that I would want to have if I was going to buy an Alfa Romeo. At the back, you've got a little carbon fibre lip here. You have nice exhaust system, which is accidentally stuck in loud mode. How about that? What a shame. On the interior, it's very impressive. Now, these things started at around 60-something thousand pounds. This one's got a comfort sort of access pack, so you've got electric memory seats, keyless entry, all that sort of stuff. And one thing to note, quite important, this thing here. Now, in left-hand drive markets, you could have this car with a 6-speed manual. Unfortunately, we got one choice only, the 8-speed ZF. Otherwise, this is very nice. Now, the only option I probably would have wanted if I was going to spec one of these is the gorgeous carbon fibre Sparcos. However, these seem okay from the sort of 10 seconds that I've sat in them, and they are a lot cheaper. Those Sparcos were not a cheap option. You've got massive shift paddles here, which are proper. They got a nice feel to them, and they're fixed to the column. This is how I prefer my paddles to be. Some people like them fixed to the wheel, some people like them fixed to the column. I like them fixed to the column. So, you know, plus point there. Now, under the bonnet, everybody knows you have this 3-litre V6 Ferrari-derived engine producing about 500 horsepower. And the bonnet itself is carbon, as is the roof, as is the prop shaft. So you could look at this car from a very technical perspective. But the truth is, I don't care about that. I don't care about that at all. And honestly, it doesn't really even bother me that the weight figure that Alfa Romeo claim is a work of fiction. They say it's 1,525 kilos. It's actually 1,700. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me at all. You see, when Alfa Romeo introduced this car, they wanted it to be a demonstration of their idea of what they called the mechanics of emotion. They wanted this car to be all about the feel, not just the performance. And for me, this is something that I've always felt, and something I feel even more strongly now, having had 2 years of driving all sorts of wonderful exotic cars. To me, the idea of a nice 4-seat, practical, fast saloon car, which also has great handling feel, that's basically a unicorn car. So I'm really keen to see if this can deliver. Now, conveniently and just on cue, the sun has come out, so you'll now be able to see the fact that this car has morphed. It changes colour. This paint is extraordinarily metallic. It's actually not a super strong sun at the minute, but I hope that you can see there just how beautiful and bright this Competizione red paint is. It's about a £1,700 option, so it's a good looker. The spec sheet is very impressive, but of course, really, I'm here for one thing and one thing only. How does it drive? Let's find out. Now, this being an Alfa Romeo, the first thing you probably want to know is how many times it's broken. The answer to which is none. It's had a small issue with the heater fan, a small issue with the little switch that you can use to open the door with the keyless entry, and that's it. Now, just so we can get all the boring stuff out of the way to begin with, servicing on these is every 9,000 miles, and most of them are sold with a service pack, so I can't really tell you what the cost of servicing is. What I can tell you is that the steering in this thing is hyper sharp. I mean, crazy sharp. Really quite twitchy. Now, people talk about modern Ferraris as having very sensitive steering racks, and I know that a lot of the team that were responsible for this car also worked on the 458 Speciale, and I've not actually had the pleasure of driving a modern era Ferrari, but this is kind of what I expect the steering might feel like. Now, I've currently got the car set in dynamic mode, and this has Alfa's DNA system, which I really can't be bothered to go into. Suffice it to say, dynamic is the almost sportiest setting. It's just one step shy of race. The crucial difference being in this car that because it has the broken exhaust flap, you don't have to put it in race to get the fruity sound. What you can also do is when you set the car to dynamic is you can override the dampers. So by default, they'll be set to a sporty setting. I have this set to soft because we live in England, and it's not a country where you really want dampers that stiff. Now, I'm presently driving the car in regular drive mode just while it gets warmed up and while I get used to the feel of it. So far, everything's pretty good. I can see a reasonable amount of the bonnet, and the ZF 8-speed gearbox, which you'll find in literally everything these days, is doing a very admirable job. It's shuffling through the cogs very nicely. Thus far, my impressions of the car are one of, well, extraordinarily high quality. I've spent all this week with an Audi RS3, which is a very finely put together machine that is built by Germans that pretty much exclusively do very nice saloon cars and things, and this is every bit the quality of that. I must say, it even sounds a little bit better than I thought. One of my criticisms of the Giulia Quadrifoglio previously has been that the exhaust note is just not anywhere near as sonorous as I might expect from an Alfa. I mean, let's face it, you think Alfa, people think of that glorious old V6 Busso, and that thing did sound pretty special. This having a 90-degree V6, sounds a bit odd. And I would say that that's because of the 90-degree layout, but then Jaguar have the same thing, and the V6 in the F-Type sounds totally different. Possibly the big difference between the two of those is that this has a pair of turbochargers in there, which of course are going to be robbing a little bit of the sound. Otherwise though, even on fairly twisty, tight British roads, this isn't feeling that intimidating. What I'm going to do in a minute is flick it into manual, because I've had varied experiences with this ZF box. In a few of the cars that I've driven, it's been wonderful, brilliant, and I've come away thinking like, oh blimey, I can see exactly why BMW and people are ditching dual clutches in favour of this. In other cars I've experienced it, I've sort of gone, this is a bit rubbish, I want the dual clutch to come back. So I haven't really worked out yet what the pattern is. The only thing I've managed to discern thus far is that it doesn't seem to cope that well with huge power cars. So for example, the Audi S8 that I drove, the gearbox just didn't really enjoy what it was being asked to do. That being said, that car had 700 horsepower versus this car's 500. And of course, something like an Audi S8 is going to be designed to be a more luxury car rather than a sporting one. So let's flick this into manual. Massive paddles. Well, I gotta say, the paddles themselves have a lovely feel. Pretty sure they're metal. This thing shifts quick. I don't just mean moves, the actual gearbox is doing what I tell it to. This is really going to worry me, this car, because I was kind of hoping I wasn't going to like it that much. Wow, that's actually doing exactly what I say. I've driven a few dual clutch boxes recently. Well, when you're not on it, and believe me, I'm not on it, they just don't respond as quickly as you like. So you sort of, you know, say you're at 3,000 RPM or so, and you're sort of half throttled, and you press it, and then rather than giving you that bop, bop that you expect, it just goes, But this thing is pretty good. I mean, I don't know what Alfa were doing for about 15 years, but I'm so glad that they came out with this. I should probably also take a moment to mention the fact that this car was basically the brainchild of Sir Gianmarconi, who unfortunately passed away this week, so dedicate the video to him, because as I understand it, he was pretty involved in making sure that this car was exactly right, and he had this vision for Alfa Romeo, and whoever eventually takes over from him, like, I hope they learn from this, because this thing is pretty damn good. I mean, honestly, even if it wasn't that great to drive, I would still say for Alfa to have suddenly churned out a car with this kind of, and I'm going to use the word in the most positive way possible, a Germanic level of fit and finish, with a bit of Italian flair, that's damn impressive. I really like blown away by this car, and I've recently been discussing with a gentleman in the comments section, so hi there if you're watching, about the M4. I don't like the M4. I generally very much like BMW products. I'm a really big fan of the M2, 135, the 240, all those kind of cars. I even like stuff like the 6 Series and so on. You know, all lovely cars. I've owned half a dozen BMWs. At one point in time, half of all the cars I'd ever owned were BMWs. And the M4, to me, was a real disappointment. And I think from now on, if anybody says to me, well, why don't you like the M4? I'll just say Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. This is what BM should have been doing. But I'm kind of glad that Alfa did it instead. You see, I've discussed in many videos the fact that if nothing else, what I really like is there being variety and choice in what we have. You know, the cars that are out there. I don't want a world where everybody just goes out and buys the same bland econo box. And I know that this car's very kind owner, Angus, felt very much the same way about buying this, is that he essentially wanted something that fit the M3 sort of template, and he was also a former BMW owner, having a modified 1 Series, a car which I'll follow him, I'll back him up and say that's a great car and a real bargain as well on the used market. But when he saw this, and presumably when he subsequently drove it, well, I can see very clearly why he fell for it. So back to slightly more practical concerns, fuel economy. The reality is that many of these kinds of cars don't get the sort of fuel economy that is claimed, and that's more to do with the fact that they're just that damn enjoyable to drive rather than anything being actually wrong with the car. On a long run, this apparently will get sort of low to mid 30s if you're being sensible. Of course, with an engine and a setup like this, you don't really want to be that sensible. Honestly, I can't get over the steering. Now, I was chatting with Angus before I got in this, and I think he had some sort of level of concern. Obviously, me being lovely and spoiled as I am, getting to drive my Lotus and stuff about all the time, that, you know, I'd maybe say like, you say the steering's good, actually it's rubbish. No, the steering is really good, so I'm glad to confirm that for you. Gearbox is the surprise. The gearbox is the... I had this little bit of hope. I gotta say, I had this little bit of hope that the steering was going to be good, because a couple of my Alphas previously, the 147 and the Brera, they did have really good steering. It was a highlight of those particular cars. So seeing the setup that this car had, its double wishbone front, multi-link rear, I had a little bit of hope that the steering was going to be good, and it is. It's lacking a little bit on weighting. It's not giving the most feedback, but in terms of actual turn in and response, it's incredible. It's easily the best saloon car I've ever driven, steering feel. And if I'm being entirely honest about it, it might be the best saloon car I've ever driven, which really worries me, because I can nearly afford one if I sold the Lotus, but I don't want to. So I'm just gonna have to find someone I know to buy one, and then I'll just like borrow it all the time. But I'm gonna struggle to find things wrong with it, and I hate that. All of you that watch the channel and watch it a lot know I really love chewing a car out if it's no good. And you know, there's been plenty of times where I've really disagreed with the motoring press and their opinions on cars, but on this one I just can't. I don't even care that they lie through their teeth about the weight figures. I just don't give a shit. It's lovely. Like, whatever you're doing now, if you're even considering an M3, a C63, Audi, not necessarily so much, because you do have the all-wheel drive system with the Audi, so that is a concern for some people. But if you're quite happy to live with rear-wheel drive, like, go and buy an Alfa, please. Like, make sure enough people buy one so that they know that this was a really good idea. Like, yeah, in case you hadn't noticed, I like this car, so I'll probably end there. Otherwise, I'm just going to wind up repeating myself. There's even lovely carbon fibre and stitching and stuff. I suppose the Italians have always done interior as well. They've just fallen apart when it came to everything else, and then, like, someone woke Alfa Romeo up and they did this. Please don't let it be a one-off. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.